Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Proposers Day for the PSI program. My name is Renee Wegerson. I'm the director of ARPA-H. So we're a brand new organization in the federal government. You're here for the second programmatic Proposers Day, which we're very excited about. This is your day. So this is not a time for you to really, you will spend some time with Alana, our program manager, and our leadership here, but we're here to build teams. We're here to share with you Alana's vision for the program and really want to push boundaries. We're this new organization, the federal government, that President Biden called on us to launch these really big, audacious ideas. Don't be afraid to be left off the stage a little bit because your idea is just that crazy. But if you put some metrics to it and some design and a little bit of know-how, you might be able to show that the impossible is actually possible. And so we really want to encourage you to think big here. And Alana will share her vision for what she hopes to achieve with her program, but she's going to define the problem very clearly. And it's up to you to bring those solutions to the table. She'll be selecting a portfolio of solutions going forward. And so really think about where you see yourself as part of this program and what is your superpower that you're going to bring to the table to help her achieve those goals and help us really, bring these better health outcomes to all Americans. And that's really what we're here today. This is our second day in Chicago. So this has been a lot of enthusiasm from this ecosystem. I know you're not all from Chicago, but we really appreciate the warm welcome that we've had here and the collaborative spirit. And so if you've worked with the federal government before, our hope is by the end of today, you walk away saying, this is not like any other experience I've had with the federal government. We want this to feel a lot more smooth, streamlined, a little bit more like working with a business than with working government. We wanted this to be a really good experience for you as well for ARPA-H. So I'm going to just start with a few opening remarks. I know we're trying to make up a little bit of time so you can have a break, but just to talk about the framework within which we were stood up at ARPA-H so you understand how we can work differently than the rest of the federal government. So is there going to be a screen share here? It says I am screen sharing. There we go. Okay. This is Alana's slides. Nope, now my slides. Okay, great. So our mission at ARPA-H is to accelerate better health outcomes for everyone. And I just want to spend a second on this mission because what's really important here is the acceleration. So there may be some development already happening in the laboratory that through ARPA-H investment, we want to make sure that you are well resourced. We're not looking for the lowest bidder. We're looking for cost realism here, that you're able to really accelerate and look at horizons that might have been 15, 20 years from now. And let's make that a reality within the timelines of the program that Alana is going to share. Those health outcomes, we measure our progress on actually making impact in people's lives. Yes, there will be publications. Yes, you will get promoted in your academic positions being part of this program. But what's really important and what we're going to measure your progress on are those metrics and health outcomes. And this is really for everyone, right? So being able to figure out how to deliver solutions to rural communities, to marginalized communities, as well as everyone else is a really key tenet of what we do at ARPA-H. And we do that through the design of our programs. And even from the get-go, this isn't an afterthought in the last day of the program to figure out transition. This is actually very intentionally by design. And so as you think about building your teams, look for teams that really bring that spirit to the work as you go forward. And so President Biden's vision, for those that have worked with DARPA in the federal government, some of what we're going to talk about today is going to sound very familiar. So a place that you could actually, break the mold on how we would pursue research, pursue efforts that can't be funded right now by the private sector because they're too risky and won't be funded through the regular pathways through foundational research in the federal government. We're looking for those big ideas that are so audacious that they could work only if we try. Our model is we hire program managers that have these big visions and these ideas to pursue. So when we met Alana, we thought she's a wonderful person. She had a great CV, but really importantly, matching that was her boldness and ambition on the idea that she wanted to pursue. I also want to briefly kind of give a nod to our contracting team here, who is here to actually make real her vision through the terms that come forward in your cooperative agreements and contracts going forward. And so there's equally matched creativity and ingenuity on that side of our house. And we are really responsive. This is a presidential initiative, both ARPA-H and, of course, Cancer Moonshot. And so while there isn't a directive top down, you must work on X, Y, Z for Moonshot, we do want to address a lot of the Moonshot objectives through some of the work that we're going to be pursuing through this program. And the way that we can move so nimbly and do this work is actually through our authorities. So Congress and the president have given us authorities that allow us to act in a very different manner than the rest of the federal health funding ecosystem. We are stood up within NIH, so we have access to a lot of that expertise, including the surgical community and teams that Ilana has been working very closely with to understand their perspectives and subject matter expertise. But we're independent from them in that our organization reports directly to Secretary Becerra. We have our own agenda, our own budget, and so we're able to move very differently than the rest of NIH. So we'll lean on their expertise, but we have our own pursuit and we have our own decision making. If you propose to this program, which I hope that you do, don't expect study sections. Ilana is going to be the decision maker on this program. And so she is your champion for this project. She will be working with you side by side. She will not give you grant money and walk away. She's going to have a seat at the table and really help you achieve the goals for this program. It's a very, very different model. And it's very proactive, high contact program management. So again, you should walk away today feeling like, wow, that's really different than other federal funding experiences. I should also say that we have this really unique authority to directly reimburse FDA. And so what we hope through the programs that we launch, we have opportunity to define what this looks like. Does it mean that working with FDA, maybe sharing data pre-competitively, we'll be able to get an accelerated path to market? We don't know, but FDA is willing to have those conversations with us. So bring that creativity from your ideas to the table today of how we might be able to use some of those authorities going forward. We're really here to be a catalyst for the entire health ecosystem. We are here to work with our customers, the public, all Americans, the healthcare providers, the surgeons that are going to be in receipt of the technologies that you will be developing. They need to be enthusiastically adopting your tools, right? They have to be a part of the design of this program. It's not handed over to them at the back end. We know it won't work if we do it in that way. Performers, that's the term for those that we fund. So some of you will become performers. Those are academics, industry, and teams therein. And then finally, of course, our stakeholders, the federal government, CMS, payers, FDA, and private investors are all really key for us to catalyze. People and projects are here at ARPA-H for a transaction, and then it must leave the agency. We're not a long-term funder. So our initial mission focus areas, I don't know if this, would you like me to hand it off to you? So I'll pause there and I'm going to hand this to Dr. Amy Jenkins, who leads our Health Science Futures Office, where this program is launched out of. But hopefully we've kind of shared with you just setting the stage for how working with ARPA-H is going to look very different. And I'm really excited for the technical vision from Ilana and then the leadership that Amy's brought to the table here today. So over to you, Amy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Renee, and welcome everybody. So as Renee mentioned, I'm Amy Jenkins. I'm the director of the Health Science Futures Office. Our structure at ARPA-H is very flat. So we have our director that you just heard from. We have 4 mission offices, and those are highlighted. Well, one of them is highlighted here. There are 4 total offices. Each of those offices has an office director. And then within those offices, we have our program managers. And those program managers, like Ilana, announce these programs and champion these programs and really build these capabilities. And if you propose and you become one of the performers, you're part of that Health Science Futures community as well, and community of performers. So as Renee mentioned, we have 4 initial mission focus areas in ARPA-H. This is to put some guardrails up on healthcare, right? If we want to improve health outcomes for all, that's a huge area. We need to focus a little bit. And so these are our focus areas. So I'm going to quickly tell you about the 3 others, and then we're going to come back to Health Science Futures. So scalable solutions, this is an office focused on delivering new solutions so that we can get to people everywhere. So this might be last mile delivery to rural communities. This might be manufacturing initiatives. Proactive health is focused on how we can prevent people from becoming patients. So think things like behavioral health, prevention of chronic diseases like diabetes, and prevention of acute diseases. And then finally, resilient systems. This is our office focused on building resilient healthcare systems. A lot of the data initiatives, think electronic health records and how we can make our systems talk to each other better, live in this office. What we're going to focus on today is Health Science Futures, and that's because we're all here for the PSI Proposers Day, which is within the Health Science Futures office. And in this office, we're expanding what's technically possible. We like to say that this is ARPA-H's ARPA office. And so what we want to do here is build the tools, the platforms, the technologies, the scientific underpinnings and advances of the future of healthcare. So I think you all can see that what you may develop here, there may be optics, there may be new devices, there may be new imaging agents. These could be used in many different areas, but it really could underpin a lot of technologies moving forward into the future. And so I want to give down here, we have a couple examples of what the types of things that could be done in this office. We are generally a disease agnostic office, but we're not entirely disease agnostic. So it's not like we're saying you have to be disease agnostic. And obviously this program has components that are very disease focused. And our first program was on osteoarthritis and was disease focused. But in general, many of the things we do will be just very general and foundational advances, very revolutionary advances in scientific areas that are going to be applicable to many different disease states. There's a couple different ways that we can go after these revolutionary advances. And you've heard Renee talk about how we want to fund that very bold new science, and it will feel very, very different than how it typically feels with other government funding. In some of the ways we think about building this type of revolutionary approach, I'm not going to hit on all these because we do want to keep moving here, but what I really want to focus on is that last one, the collaboration access across disciplines. This is why you're all in this room. Many of the times, the things that we put out in these broad agency announcements, you're going to read it and you're going to say, that's impossible. I can't do it. I'm laughing like, come on, ARPA-H, this is ridiculous. But what we want is we want teams to come together with a variety of people that may actually make it possible. I have sat in rooms like this where people were like, it's impossible. You cannot do it. And I said, okay, go back and talk to each other and think about maybe, if you're a chemist, if you bring in an electrical engineer, maybe that's what you need. If you had everything you could possibly need in the world, could you do this? And that's what we're looking for you to think about today, because everything you could possibly need in the world may be other disciplines, there may be equipment, maybe materials, cost realistic, of course, but think about that. And it's amazing how many times once people go back and start thinking, they're like, well, okay, if I had this and I had this, I could probably do it. That's what we're looking for you to do here today. See who's out there, talk to each other, understand what you would need to maybe make this a reality. So what do we do in this office? So far, we have two programs. You're going to hear about the very first one today, and then we have another program focused on making joints heal themselves. But these are the types of very innovative programs that we're going to develop in this office, and hopefully some of you will be members and performers within this office in the future. Very quickly, I do want to talk about the program manager life cycle. So Alana is not here forever. She has got a time limit. Our program managers, and myself included, leadership as well, come in for 3-year terms and then have the possibility to re-up for another 3 years, up to another 3 years if they're interested in that. So that means she's going to drive this process. She's going to want to see the results of this effort before she leaves ARPA-H and really want to try to push towards that capability. So we want you all to feel that urgency too. Program managers will typically start anywhere between 3 and 5 programs, about a program a year. So you can anticipate, many of these types of programs out of our program managers within our office. And so how did we get here? So Alana came in, she had a great idea. She knew a challenge, she knew a problem that she wanted to focus on. We agreed through a rigorous interview process, and then she launched this program. So where we are today is you're on that third bullet. This is program launch. This is where we've announced the program to the world and you all are starting to think about it. Then Alana will, based off your proposals, fund groups, multiple groups to achieve the goals of this program. Some of you will be wildly successful. Some of you may not be as successful. One thing I do want to point out is that we are doing revolutionary science here. We are really trying to push the boundaries. If you are the group that gets halfway through, we want midterm successes as well. So that's why this program is if you look at the BAA, you'll see metrics along the way. We want to know that you're succeeding, and we want to be able to point to successes halfway through the program, because getting all the way to the end is going to be revolutionary. We need to build those successes throughout the lifetime of the efforts. So it's very, very metrics driven, and we are serious about those metrics. So if that midpoint say, okay, well, I'm not going to hit that one, it's no big deal, I'll get it by the end. That's not always the case. She's going to be watching, and she's going to want to make sure that you're making progress towards those goals. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Alana because this is what really matters. But thank you all for being here. Please, as Renee said, talk to each other. Talk to us a little bit, but talk to each other more. And welcome to ARPA-H and enjoy the day. So Alana, over to you.
Okay, again, thank you for being here. There are seats up front, so there are some of you standing up. Feel free to come up here. And also, all these slides will be publicly available in a few days after this, including the recording of what is presented, so there is no need to take pictures. Okay, so what are we doing here? What problem are we solving? And essentially, there are two types of problems, all sort of embedded in one. And that is surgeons cannot distinguish critical anatomical structures and cancer from normal tissue. And that leads to unintentional patient injury, and that leads to reoperation because not all the cancer was not taken out. So what is the vision of the PSI program? Is that we will create devices that will automatically locate tumor edges, such as tumors can be removed entirely in one single surgery, as well as devices that will locate the critical anatomical structures, such as they're not unintentionally injured. So fundamentally, PSI has two different buckets. The first one is mostly related to oncological surgeries, and that is meant to help surgeons identify cancer at the cellular level during the first surgery, such as everything can be taken out in one shot. The second part of the program is not only related to oncological surgery, it's related to any kind of surgery. And that includes thoracic surgery, orthopedic surgery, name it, because these critical structures get injured during any kind of surgery. So again, sort of reiterating what the current challenges in surgery are is, first of all, you think as cancer being black on a red background, and that's as far from truth as possible. So cancer looks exactly the same. It becomes very challenging to know when to resect and when to stop resection. And as a consequence, overall, more than 10% of the surgeries result in cancer being left behind. This is found a week later. It will lead to reoperations. And in some cases, reoperations are not even possible, and the consequences are actually worse. Again, the other type of problem is that, for example, critical structures as nerve, you think as white on a red background. That's not true. Nerves look exactly like normal tissue, and as a consequence, they get unintentionally injured. And nerve injuries alone lead to about $1.5 billion health expenses per year. That's also a problem that academic centers do better than rural hospitals, and that's something that we would like to address during this program as well. So what is the standard of care for cancer visualization? And I know most of you are very familiar, but for completeness, I will go through here. So the standard of care is pathological examination, which is done days after the initial surgery. So the tumor is taken out, it is sliced every 3 to 5 millimeters, and the pathologist will look at it at the surface of those slides days later. And negative margin means that all the tumor cells are contained entirely within the lump taken out. That's called a negative margin. And then the patient is fine. You don't need another surgery. Sometimes, however, cancer cells are very close to the margin. That is called a positive margin, and that will usually require reoperation. So again, that's FFPE is the standard of care. However, in some instances, you have intraoperative frozen section. And what that means is you have a pathologist on call. He or she will communicate with the surgeon during surgery, and will receive the tumor during that operation to examine a few select slices from the tumor taken out. It doesn't always work. It's the standard of care, for example, for head and neck. It's not the standard of care for breast surgeries because freezing and thawing causes artifacts, and it's the correlation between FFPE and intraoperative frozen section is not very good. It's also not an ideal process because essentially it stops surgery for 20 minutes or more. The sample has to be shipped out. The pathologist has to be on call. And rural hospitals, for example, don't have this pathologist on standby. In vivo pathology, which means you take the tumor out and then you examine the intraoperative cavity to see if you've left something behind, that's not currently possible. Now, what's the consequence of this state of affairs? It's not great. And we've done our best to summarize the state of the art. What you see here is a summary of the cancer types with the number of surgeries per year, the approximate positive margins, and of course, results vary according to what publication we're citing, as well as the cost per readmission and the healthcare cost. And as you see, these costs are horrendous. The white lines are the types of surgeries where reoperation is the standard of care. The gray lines are the cases where reoperation is not the standard of care. So for example, in prostate surgery, if you take the tumor out and you find the positive margin, the tumor was in the intraoperative cavity and things reorganize, it's very hard to find the match. And in that case, the operation is not the standard of care. The patient is being given chemotherapy or radiation therapy. However, that's not a solution that's as good as having clean margins. And on the lower part, you'll see the approximate 5-year survival rate with positive and negative margins. And as you see, for example, for prostate cancer, the difference is staggering. With negative margins, the 5-year survival rate is about 70%. With positive margins, it goes down to about 40%. So not only that positive margins cost money, it costs lives. Now, what's the standard of care for healthy tissue visualization? It's not ideal. Again, nerves are impossible to see. And the surgeons usually just use a headlamp and their knowledge of the anatomy. They know where the nerves should be, but by the simple fact that you are in a surgery, things move around and you have a pathological condition, you have a tumor, then nerves get moved around. So simply knowing where they should be is not enough. You have neuromonitoring in which if you want to save a nerve, you actually hook it and stimulate it. But it doesn't really work when you have a lot of nerves in a particular space. Intraoperative visualization of nerves is not currently possible. Now, what are the consequences of the fact that we cannot see this critical anatomy? They're pretty bad. So again, nerves cannot be seen, and surprisingly 10 to 50% of all surgeries result in neuropathic pain. There is no medicine for neuropathic pain. Some of the injuries will actually heal in and of themselves. However, the nerve injury alone costs $1.5 billion. It's not a joke, and these are problems that don't go away after 1 week or two. They're sometimes with the patient for the rest of their lives. It's not only nerves. You can accidentally injure blood vessels, and of course, that causes complications during surgery. You can accidentally injure the urethra because you don't see it, and obviously, that causes incontinence, not ideal either. The parathyroid glands are very small structures around the thyroid gland. Occasionally, they can be taken out by accident, and that causes hypocalcemia. The lymphatics are also not visible, and then you can accidentally injure lymph ducts and lymph nodes. That causes lymphedema. And all of these, again, are not problems that last for a week. They're problems that last for years. So having defined the problem, this is what PSI is aiming to do. There are two specific technical areas within PSI. One is mostly geared towards cancer localization. The other one is geared towards healthy structure localization. Within the first one, technical area 1, there are two flavors. Flavor 1 is in vitro pathology. What does it mean? Is you take the tumor out, you put it on a device, and you assess within the intraoperative space very quickly whether there is cancer left. The second flavor of the technical area 1 is in vivo pathology. And that means you remove the tumor, and instead of examining the tumor, you actually examine the intraoperative cavity. Optional, you have contrast agents for tissue labeling. However, we are not allowing contrast agents for TA1A. So you cannot give patients agents. Because that makes it more expensive and more complicated. You need to take the tumor out. You can label the tumor afterwards. That's fine. But we are not allowing you to develop agents to give patients. For TA1B, we will be allowing the development of contrast agents. In terms of healthy structure localization, again, we ask you to develop structures that can sense the structures of interest at their depth, and they have to be truly integrated with the surgical workflow. The performers may choose TA1A, TA1B, or TA2. We do not want one group to sign up for more than one because we realize each of these are very complicated and we do not want to overstretch you. The only thing we will allow is combinations between TA1B and TA2 if the technologies used are very similar for the two aims. One of the questions that we weren't clear, again, it's one group that cannot apply to more than one. However, if within a school there are multiple groups that want to apply to the same technical area or different technical areas, that's fine. We just do not want to overstretch one group. Now, high-level implementation, what is TA1A? The performers must develop an end-to-end system, and I'm underlying the word end-to-end. We do not want pieces. We want an end-to-end solution for in vitro pathology. We want micron resolution, so we want cellular resolution in the OR with no pathologist that should assess in less than 10 minutes plus 5-minute sample prep if there are cancer cells left behind. So how would it work? You take the tumor out, you put it on your device, then you do either whole surface imaging or you slice the specimen. You will have automated pathology read, and the surgeon will be told within less than 10 minutes whether the margins are clear or not. If they're not, where there are cancer cells left, such as he knows where to go back and resect some more. Cancer types in scope will be all. However, we have a ranked preference in breast, colorectal, head and neck, and ovarian, simply because of the magnitude of the problem in those cases. There are some specifications, and it's at this point where you go, you're crazy. We're a little crazy, but we really think you can do it. Right, so the samples must be fresh. The devices must be able to accommodate 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter sample, so like yay big. You have two imaging options. You can image either the entire sample surface or you slice the specimen and you image in cross-section. You need to gross the specimen, but the sample the thickness of the sample should be less than 4 millimeters. Your sample prep should be less than 5 minutes. Your total imaging time should be less than 10 minutes. Why have we come up with these numbers? Because we know if you go to 15 to 20 minutes, it's not going to be picked up in the marketplace. We have talked to many surgeons, and they are very keenly aware. They knew to the minute what their average OR time was. They had no idea what their margins were. So the hospital pushes very hard to have the surgeons out of the OR very quickly. Therefore, your solution has to work in that time frame. The imaging resolution must be subcellular. It must be what the pathologists use to make their determination. However, you can have a multi-resolution approach in which the majority of the sample is imaged at coarser resolution, and then you focus on the regions of interest. The solution must be generally applicable. We do not want solutions for one cancer or another. We will be asking you to demonstrate your solution in 2 cancer types. The first one should be breast, colorectal, head and neck, and ovarian. The second one can be anything of your own choice. Under TA1A, as I mentioned before, you cannot have a contrast agent given to the patient. You can, however, have a staining agent. It may be H&E. It may be anything else that you develop. If you choose breast cancer, we would appreciate the imaging and classification of the sentinel lymph nodes. However, that is not required. It's just encouraged. We want automated classification. We do not want a pathologist in the OR. If the margins are positive, the surgeon must know where to go back. You can just tell him yes or no, because he needs to go back and resect some more, and he needs to know where. The final sensitivity needs to be greater than 98% and the specificity greater than 95%. And I know that's crazy, but there are solutions out there in the market with about 70% that didn't make it. They're out there. They decrease the reoperation rate, but they are not widely spread. So you really need that high sensitivity and specificity in order for something to penetrate the market. The ground truth will be 3 pathologists using FFPE, and we expect to end the program with a 510K PMA or de novo submission. Okay, so plan your program such as by the end of it, you have a real device that is ready to go through the regulatory process. And of course, we fully understand that's not a joke. It takes a lot of resources, and that's fine. We will be behind you with our transition team, and my colleagues will explain to you later. We not only give you money, but there is expertise that we have that will be there for you. These are phases and milestones. This is how we expect the program will flow. We have metrics all along to measure your progress. Again, it's hard. We think it's doable. It's also possible that some of you are advanced and you really don't come in where we think you may come in, and that's fine. So make your program as aggressive as you want. If you want to move faster than what we have here, that's fine as well. Now, TA1B, which is in vivo cancer visualization, what do we want here? We want an end-to-end system for in vivo pathology. So you're not examining the resection specimen, you are examining the resection cavity. We want micron resolution of the resection cavity. You can either image the resection cavity or you can have a pre-identified multiple ROIs. How do you choose those pre-identified ROIs? We will not accept the surgeon thinks that if cancer is left behind, it will be there. Therefore, I'm going to examine there. You have to have a deterministic way of deciding why you're examining the ROI instead of the whole cavity. We want no pathologist, and we want less than 10 minutes examination for the whole cavity or 3 minutes per ROI. And we allow 3 minutes for not sample prep, but cavity prep. Right, so you would prepare the resection cavity, you would label the macroscopic regions of interest, and in this case, it may be contrast agents that label the cancer environment, maybe inflammation, maybe macrophages, whatever you have it. You image either the entire cavity or the ROIs. You get the images, you automatically read them, no pathologist, and you tell the surgeon if anything needs to be resected. And again, we are fully aware that you have to deal with tens of terabytes and fast processing and motion. This is why you're here. This is why we're ARPA, okay? We know it's hard. The cancer types in scope will be all. However, as a ranked preference for the first cancer, we have prostate, breast, and ovarian. So typically, this is something that you would develop for closed surgeries. For open surgery, it's very easy, throw the sample in a device. If you have closed surgery, laparoscopic surgery, that's really not a good option. And that's what this is meant for. Now, some specifications, you will have two imaging options. You either image the entire cavity or the pre-identified ROIs. Again, we want cellular resolution. ROI imaging in less than 3 minutes, or entire field of view in less than 10 minutes. The device must allow the operator to have both hands free. We don't want the surgeon holding to something for 10 minutes. The solution must be generally applicable. Again, it will not survive in the wild if you only have a solution for one cancer. We ask you to test it in 2 cancers. The first one should be prostate, breast, or ovarian. The second one can be anything. For breast cancer, again, we will ask you to classify the sentinel lymph nodes if you can. It's not mandatory. For prostate cancer, because the robot is the standard of care, we ask you to integrate your solution with that. So don't make a device that has a 5 millimeter diameter because it's not going to go through the incision. We are allowing in vivo contrast agents here. The classification must be automated. The final sensitivity, again, 98%, and the specificity more than 95%. The ground truth will be one pathologist reading FFPE. And if you use a contrast agent or a cocktail of contrast agents, we want that agent to label more than 90% of the relevant cancers. So that means that agent, if your goal is prostate cancer, then that agent should label more than 90% of the prostate cancer seen in vivo. For the second type of cancer, say you have chosen ovarian, that agent should label more than 75% of the ovarian cancers. What we expect at the end of this part of the program is an IDE submission for the device software combination and an IND submission for the contrast agent. So we're very keen on decoupling the two because we want the agent to be used with anything else. If we tie them together, if somebody else comes with a better device, then they will be forced to use it. So the agent will go to FDA on its own, and the device software will go on its own. You're seeing IND submission, you know what's behind that, right? So you will need to go through toxicity, biodistribution, safety, yada, yada, yada. We will support that as part of the program. And you will have regulatory assistance from us. My colleagues will talk to you about that. These are phases and milestones. Again, these are estimative. They are hard. However, I fully realize that some of you may be more advanced and may start the program somewhere else. If you happen to be advanced and you think, I want to run a phase 1 or 2 clinical trial within this program simply because I'm starting in a different place, we will support it. Under technical area 2, which is healthy structure visualization, what do we want? We want an end-to-end system that gives surgeons a real-time 3D understanding of the critical structures. That may be nerves, blood vessels, etc. We want the accuracy to be 0.5 millimeter, and it needs to be integrated in the surgical workflow. We're not telling you how to do it. We're telling you we want the 3D location, and it's your choice how you do it. You may choose to use a contrast agent that labels the structures. You may use multispectral optical imaging, registration. You may embed a smart sensor in the surgical tools. For example, you may have a smart electrocautery device that senses nerves. When you get close to one, it blinks a light. Okay, but the surgeon, high level, needs to have an understanding of where he is in that field of view. It may be smart goggles that see the field of view, real field of view most of the time, and you flip a switch, and then you see the nerve structure. Beware, as I was talking to surgeons cannot touch anything, right? So if you want to switch between one thing or the other, it has to be by foot. So TA2 specifications, you need to precisely locate critical structure buried up to 1 centimeter in depth. We want less than 0.5 millimeter accuracy at the surface. As you go deeper to 5 to 10 millimeters, we will tolerate worse resolution. What does it mean, critical anatomical structures? It means nerves, blood vessel, ducts, organs. We will give preference to solutions that locate multiple structures. And if you only locate 1 or 2, we're very keen on making sure that the nerves are detected. But again, we will prefer solutions that detect multiple critical structures. We want an updated display with a rate of more than 10 hertz. Obviously, surgery is a dynamic process, and we want to make sure that this gets updated at the same rate at which the surgeon will usually advance. Most solutions will include at least 2 components. One is the imaging and processing of the images, and the other one is the visualization. So you have to make sure that you convey the information in a way in which the surgeon can use it. You cannot increase the OR time more than 10 minutes. However, you can add preoperative imaging. That's okay. The solution must be hands-free, except for, of course, if you have a smart electrocautery tool, that's fine. We ask you to demonstrate this in at least 2 types of surgeries in which these injuries occur. So, for example, if you're looking at a solution for nerve, maybe choose a thoracotomy, maybe choose an orthopedic surgery, because these are the surgeries where you see most nerve damage, but it's up to you what you choose. At the end of it, we expect the IDE submission for the device software combination. If you have an agent, we expect the IND submission. If you happen to be more advanced in your development, you want to conduct a clinical trial, go ahead and propose it. We will support it. These are, again, phases and milestones. All these slides will be available online, so I'm not going to go through them in gory details. You can look at them online. As I had mentioned before, we have regulatory and programmatic metrics through each of the years of the program. So you will have to think about what you need for the regulatory submission at T equals 0. And I know it's crazy when you don't have something that worked to think about the FDA submission, but you don't want to get to year 5 and be asked by the FDA, where is our design history document? And you go, I don't have it. So at T equals 0, you will have a team behind your back who will work with you and make you aware of what you will need when you first discuss with the FDA. So you will have these preliminary meetings with the FDA starting very early on in the program, and you will have a team that will advise you on how to move forward. Just to mention, the programs will be structured in 2 phases. The first one will have 2 years. The second one will have 3 years. We will have an independent verification and validation at the end of phase 1. And again, I am not going in gory details through this slide, but you see, it's very important to note where we expect the programs to end. They will end, TA1A will end with 510K submission. TA1B and TA2, we expect to end at the minimum with the IDE and IND submission. And if you can run a clinical trial, we'd love it. Now, equity. Again, we are very mindful of not creating a 500K device that only Harvard and MSKCC will afford. So where you will hear more, there are a lot of things that I was not aware of, having been in the field for 20-some years, of what it takes to have something accepted in the marketplace. And some of the things were shocking. Like, you think I develop a good thing, that should be enough and it should make an impact. And that's not true. There are a lot of things in how you build that device and how you design it that will significantly increase its chances of being accepted. Of course, make it cheap is an obvious solution, but there is a whole lot more. And Larry will talk for about half an hour of how you design that thing to have higher chances to move on. The other thing, we will have a mandatory community symposium once we kick off the program, in which we will gather surgeons, we will gather hospital administrators, we will gather surgeons from rural areas, and gather all the proposers and make sure you guys understand what their limitations are. We're not setting these limits because we're crazy. We're setting these limits because we realize that that's the only way that we develop, what you develop will actually translate as a product. And they will tell you, what's my budget? What can I afford? This comes as a capital equipment. How much can I really afford to pay for that? What are my constraints? Hey, my OR is not stable to 0.1 degree and I don't have 5G. So all of these constraints have to be built into how you design your final prototype. Okay, so all of you will have to participate in this symposium. Of course, we will promote the use of low-cost materials and equipment. That's obvious. We are also asking you to test your devices in a cohort of samples of patients that are consistent with disease incidence. The other thing is, we realize you have to develop it in your lab and you'll test it where it's closer to home. However, for the first one, we will ask you that for the last 2 months of the program, this prototype will go to a rural hospital and it will be tested there. If you do not have these connections, we'll make them for you. We will figure out where this needs to live. But we want to make sure that this prototype doesn't work only with 5 engineers around it, with 5G, with 0.1 degree temperature stability. So this needs to go out and live on its own. Now, market adoption, again, that's our first priority. We would love for you guys to publish papers in Science and Nature, but that's not our main goal. So our main goal is to have prototypes that transition. You will need to have an alpha prototype by the end of the phase 1, at the end of year 2. And we will do independent validation and verification. We're also very keen on making sure that you integrate this with the surgical workflow. And I remember as a PI, I submitted the grant and I got this back and say, you need to have a user experience expert on your proposal. And I rolled my eyes 720 degrees because obviously I don't have that person in my lab. But it's very, very important. If you don't have these people around you, we will provide them, because making sure that what you develop actually fits in there is half of the equation. You think, I'm going to touch my goggles and I will see a different view, will not work. And you need to know that at T equals 0. So that user experienced expert, will observe a surgeon, will think about what you have to do, and will give you suggestions to ensure that the gizmo can work and the surgeon will actually want to use that gizmo because it doesn't stop him or her from doing what he's doing anyways. We will help you with the regulatory pathway. You also need to make sure that you do a cost prioritization. Of course, we want half a micron resolution for the first aim. You're going to get the most expensive CCD camera. Probably not going to work because if you're going to make a $500K device, it's not going to live. So at the end of the day, where do we see the world after PSI? And we're starting for a place that oncological surgeries have a margin of error. There are a lot of reoperations because cancer is left behind. And where we want to go is to a place where reoperation rate is decreased by 90%. We also start from a place that there is a lot of visual confusion in the surgical field. You don't know what you have. The atlases look great with all your structures white and labeled. That's not the case. There are a lot of injuries of these critical structures, and we want to go to a place where surgeons understand very well what's critical around where he is in OR, and we want to reduce the reoperation, the morbidity and the accidental structure injury by more than 90%. And I know you have a lot of questions. We're moving really fast. You don't have a break either. But we do have half an hour. We are receiving a lot of questions on the PSI email. So we have a very good idea of what you guys want to know. And my team will go through probably 20 minutes of questions to make sure that most of your questions are answered. Afterwards, we will have the sidebars as well as on Monday virtually. So thank you very much. Craig, take it away.
Thanks, Lana. That was awesome. So, hey, everybody. My name is Craig Gravitz. I am the director of ARPA-H's transition office. So, Renee covered at the beginning, and then Alana touched on it during her presentation. But why are we thinking about transition now? Is it too early? I used to run an R&D program in DoD, and the major learning that I have is that if you start thinking about transition on day one, it's too late. You have to build it into the underpinnings of what you're building. And so we have a whole office dedicated to that. Okay, so you heard Renee give the overall mission, which is accelerate better outcomes for all Americans. Here's the sort of long form version we have on our website. I want to kind of direct you to sort of the part about it that's most important to me, which is that fundamentally people like Alana, geniuses, our program managers, are trying to create these technological breakthroughs that have like real world impact for all Americans. So it's not just about papers in Nature or Science. It's actually about a thing that's going to make an impact in a person's life, accelerate their health outcome. Okay, my office, the Project Accelerator Transition Innovation Office, that's all about how we make that breakthrough reach those people. And so what I've collected are a series of resources and tools available both to Alana and to our performers, eventually, some of you, to really help whatever breakthrough you create reach the eventual beneficiary. Okay, so I won't go into all of these things, but we've been designing a number of capabilities and tools. You'll hear a very specific example of that in a moment, but here's kind of a general overview of all the different tools that we have available both to our program managers and performers. The idea is that all of these things help de-risk a little bit at every step of the process so that when you get to the end, there's a much better chance that the overall solution will survive in the wild. Okay, so I mentioned that I used to run a technical program in DoD. If I had to pick one thing, aside from you have to start transition at the beginning, that is most valuable, the best way to think about it is this little rubric that was popularized by the design firm IDEO. So I spent a lot of time with my performers out in Silicon Valley, and this little thing was on a lot of doors from a lot of the people, and oftentimes it was this little thing was in the most successful groups that I was working with. And so eventually I asked somebody, what is this? Okay, So this framework are basically the three pillars of how innovation gets to people, especially in a translational context. So one, feasibility is all about that technological breakthrough, the things that Alana is trying to drive forward with her program. But there's two other pieces of that in my mind, in some respects are harder. So one is the desirabilities. This is the people aspect. So again, Alana touched on this. So if a surgeon is using something, you're going to have, a very short leash of whether that individual is going to really adopt that. If that's not easy to use or doesn't fit into their workflow, so talking about that UX, CX type of thing, it doesn't matter whether it works. It's not going to go into the marketplace. Another piece of that are the depending on the type of innovation you're trying to create, is for trust. So if you're talking about going to different communities, if you're trying to deploy an innovation and people are scared of it, think about all of the things that happened during the pandemic. That's another blocker that can prevent innovation from happening. Okay. The other aspect of it is viability. So we live in a capitalist society, and the business concerns like IP, reimbursement, these things are real. And so if there's not a value proposition, if it doesn't fit into the overall marketplace, then whatever you create isn't going to survive in the wild. And so what we do from day zero is think about all three of these things. Okay. So I'm going to give you a quick case study. Again, I'm from DoD, so I think about this type of stuff all the time. So at an ARPA, the idea is to debunk the impossible. And so a lot of times we talk about stealth technology. This is my sort of little slice of life that I think really tells the story of how ARPAs work, but then also how ARPA-H is different. So DARPA creates stealth. They invested about $35 million. It's hard because it's different dollars, whatever. Let's just go with the flow. The point of it is inflation, whatever, 1970s. My favorite piece of this story is that DARPA had like a test flight and it crashed. And the greatest part about that is that the Air Force was there, and the Air Force didn't believe it would even work in the first place. And so this small investment of $35 billion, small, and a crash, really what it did, it debunked the impossible. The Air Force from that moment on believed something was true. And before that moment, they didn't believe that it was true. And that's what Alana's trying to do with her program as well. But as hard as it is to create stealth technology, the advantage that you have in the DoD and that DARPA has is that there's a built-in transition partner. The DARPA program that created stealth technology had the Air Force right there with them. Alana does not have the benefit of having the two people who control all of surgery in the United States, that if she just debunks this, everyone will adopt it. We have a much harder ecosystem to break into. It's much more fragmented. It's much more complex. And so my office patio really solves for that difference. What we try to do, going back to my other slide, is sort of de-risk every single bit of it. So while we don't have one transition partner, we try to think about all the different pathways of success. I won't read all of these, but some of the ways that we like to think about things are, what would those transition pathways be? These are the typical ones that we think of, some of the ways that your technology might transition. And so these are the things that we're thinking about as we're helping you to de-risk things. What would success look like? Okay. So I talked about that IDEO concept of desirability, viability, feasibility. One of the really amazing things that we've been able to do is we are going to put that into practice, not only spiritually in some of the things that we do, but also in a geographically like manifestation of a geographic manifestation of this. So Congress said, hey, ARPA-H, you need to have 3 sites. And so, okay, little weird, honestly. Most of ARPA type work happens all over. It happens, program managers traveling, going to lab meetings, whatever. Okay, we'll roll with it. So what if we create The 3 states based around desirability, viability, and feasibility. And so what we did is we competed these things. And so we have a hub, we'll announce where these things will be, dedicated to customer experience. So we talked about understanding that workflow, that you're going to need to know how things actually work in a real world context. We have an entire hub that's going to be dedicated to really understanding those considerations. Even more important than the hub, that region is going to have a number of spokes attached to it. So when Ilana mentions that you will have to try some of this stuff out in a rural context, we will be able to help you through this network that we're building. So one of the hub and spoke elements is dedicated to CX, customers, people, desirability. We have another one that is dedicated to viability, the business aspect that we were talking about. We call this our investor catalyst network. So as you get a little bit more mature and you need to attract funding, or you need to understand, regulatory reimbursement concerns, we'll be able to operationalize that network. Again, physical place, hub, other physical places, spokes. So we'll actually be able to do real world implementations of these things. The final hub, not part of the original competition of this, is our stakeholder and operations hub. That's more sort of like being close to FDA, CMS, our federal partners and whatnot. Okay, and this is really just a visualization of what that might look like. Okay, I know we're a little bit low on time. This is an example of how some ways that we might incorporate CX into programs. Like Ilana mentioned, we're going to be, advising both her and our performers during performance. These are ways that, will help you build that empathy with the people that you're solving for. Okay. Renee mentioned that we'd spent a little bit of time here in Chicago building a network. One of the things that I manage under Patio is an engagements team. And we spent a lot of time going to different regions of the country to really make sure that people know who ARPA-H is. But more importantly, we understand the concerns of and the considerations of both the performer community, people like you who might want to submit and be part of ARPA-H programs, but also the people that we're solving for, our beneficiaries. So we have meetings with patient advocate groups, other types of folks. Okay. And then finally, just as a quick transition, one of the most, my favorite capabilities that we have here in Patio is what's called an Experts in Residence program. So Ilana mentioned that we'll be helping you with regulatory reimbursement, user experience, all of these things during the course of your performance, obviously at Ilana's discretion, what she thinks needs to make sense. But you're not just going to be alone to sort of figure this out. We will provide those resources. And we have this amazing tool where we can pull in experts. We have one of those experts here with us today to give a little sample of what type of advice you might receive and the type of advice that Ilana has been receiving, both in program design, but then also during the course of performance. So with that, I will hand it over to one of our wonderful experts in residence.
Thank you, Craig. So I'm Larry Yost. I'm here as a consultant to Digitalis Commons, which is a non-for-profit arm of Digitalis Ventures, which is partnering with the ARPA-H program to provide technical, financial, and commercial expertise. I have a consulting company that's focused on helping emerging technology companies come into the market and commercialize technologies, market access types of things. I work with companies both in the US, outside the US, big companies, small companies, companies spun out of academia, physician, surgeon, inventors, and you have this broad range of either background understanding or no understanding. Design control. Something comes up. If you're going to bring a product to market, you got to do it under design control. And what does that mean in a quality system and things like that? Craig's exactly right. I have companies come to me and they say, I just got 510K or de novo. Can you help me with reimbursement? And it's like, no, you should have been doing that 3 years ago. So you're going to see some things here. You're going to say, well, why are we worrying about this now? Because you need to start thinking about these as you start going through the design process. So basically, I'm going to provide a little bit of understanding of provider and payer factors. So when I say provider, that means physician, surgeon, hospital, healthcare center, ambulatory surgery center, and then payer. And I'll go through the different types of payers. So what are also some commercialization related factors that you got to think about during the product design and development process? Not R&D. R&D is conceptual here, but as you go into the product design and development, you got to be thinking about commercialization all the time through that. And then considerations based on current and emerging technologies. So I have a little Venn diagram here. In the middle is the most important thing. It's the patients. It's why we're here. I'm a pharmacist by training. It's why I do these things. I try to work with companies that have cool technologies. But just as an aside, and I was telling Alon this morning, my son is a surgical resident about 3 blocks away from here at Northwestern. And right now he's on a surgical oncology rotation. So I spent yesterday quizzing him a little bit and pulling as much as I could as go through that. But again, what are these factors? So if you look over here on the left, you have the physician and healthcare professionals, you have the hospital and healthcare systems, you have the payers, and you have the regulatory FDA, but also you have CMS and it fits part of the payers, but also has this relationship with the FDA. And these slides will be available afterwards. A little busy. I'm going to just touch on this, but there's really 3 things that I wanted to bring up first, and that is one, health systems. You're seeing this combination of hospitals right now, and it's rapidly going. So the number 1 health system in the country is HCA. They have about 200 hospitals across the country. Decisions on new technologies are made in Nashville, Tennessee. I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. An HCA hospital there, they want to bring something new in there, they can't do it. They got to get it through Nashville. Right. Number 2 is the VA. All right. Different system. But again, you're seeing this combination, especially some of the smaller, more rural hospitals. Financially, they're struggling. Nursing shortage, challenges relative to getting paid. So they're trying to find ways of how do I stop the bleeding financially? And we really need to think about when we're bringing on new technologies, especially expensive technologies, how we think about it. So then you have the value analysis committee. It may be the hospital base or health system base, but they're one. What's the benefit to their patients? Will this technology replace something else? If not, it's an incremental add-on cost to them, right? And then, well, if it is an incremental add-on cost, are we going to get reimbursed? Hospitals typically are thinking about what happens during that admission and what's the cost during that admission. If you say, well, this is going to save this money to the health system down the line, they're not really worried about that. They're worried about their own financial well-being. Right? Then lastly, you have some device consideration. So one, is this a device for inpatient or outpatient? There's different payment systems, and I'll go through this based on if it's a inpatient admission, so more than 2 midnight stays, or an outpatient. They come in the morning, have the procedure, and they go home. The other thing is it capital or disposable? We say in the device world, razor blade combination as well. If Medicare has special new technology programs, it doesn't pay for capital, only disposables. So if you want to bring something in, you have to figure out, well, how can I have a disposable component? How can I get paid for? You can't provide the capital for free. All right, that's problematic from a Department of Justice point of view, but are there ways of combining these 2 things together so that we can get them in the hospital and then also focus on the reimbursement side of things? Any reimbursement presentation, you're going to see a slide something like this. There's 3 components of reimbursement. There's coding, there's coverage, and there's payment. So you got to have a code. That's how the hospital will either bill for the procedure or the device. And everybody always comes to you and say, I need a CPT code. If they get the CPT code, they think they're fine. It's not enough. You got to have all 3 of these. Coverage that's where you're fighting with the payers, right? I've got a code, but will you cover it both for this procedure, but also for this patient population? So they may say, yeah, we'll cover it. However, only for these patients. And they put these conditions on it to narrow it down, especially the commercial insurers, right? Then payment, right? You can get paid, but is it adequate payment? So in other words, if the hospital gets a payment, but it's not enough for the procedure, it's not enough to cover the cost of your technology, it's a problem. Example would be if you're doing stuff in an ambulatory surgery center. from a Medicare point of view, they'll pay a hospital this much. And then usually the payment rate for an ASC is 40 to 60% of what they pay the hospital. But if you have a procedure that's very device intensive, where the cost of the device is really high, you may get into an ASC and what they get paid is not enough to even cover the cost of your device. So understanding how all that works is really important. Payers. This is usually the challenge. All right. So you get through the FDA process, you get a de novo, you get a 510K, you get a PMA. You said, we're done, right? Well, so 510K, it's substantially equivalent to what the predicate device was. Well, that's not enough for payers. They want it to be better, a substantial clinical improvement over what's out there. And that's not what the studies you did to get it on the market through the regulatory process were. So you have to start thinking about this as you're going through those studies. And I'm working with a couple of companies right now. We're designing studies with this in mind. The regulatory folks said, well, here, we just need this bar. We just need to get substantial equivalence. And that's not going to get you in the marketplace and get adoption. So you have your commercial insurers, publicly traded companies. You're seeing combinations of those now, combinations with, I'm a pharmacist by training. So you have, a drugstore chains now partnering with, or being a part of the payers. You have private insurance, which would be Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Then you have Medicare and Medicaid. So Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Administered nationally, they make national coverage decisions. And then when the claims come in from the hospitals and the physicians, they go to the MACs, the Medicare Administrative Contractors, regionally based, all the claims go in there. If there's not a national coverage decision by Medicare, the MACs make a decision. So if we talk about coding, they have a category 3 CPT code, which is a temporary code. Those decisions, how much the physicians get paid, and sometimes the hospitals, are made at the MAC level. But then you also have Medicare Advantage. So right now, approximately 50% of Medicare patients are on Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage programs are run by commercial insurance companies. So there's a little bit different. And if you look at what's going on out there right now, you have both the longer prior authorization process. You have more denials and appeals process type of going on. And you see some health systems saying, we're not going to take Medicare Advantage anymore. And then last, you have Medicaid, which is run at a state level. So understanding who is your population. And then again, you have the VA, and then you have TRICARE. So you have the, active military services and their families, right? So some of your technologies may fit into these different things. And, if you have a patient who is 65 and above, right? Okay, great. You're going to fall mainly under Medicare, but you have to think about how these groups decide and make decisions on coverage. They don't make coding decisions that Medicare does, but the other ones don't make any coding decisions. They make coverage decisions and payment decisions. So what are they looking for, the payers? There was a recent article within, in August from the Stanford Biodesign Group. If you have a chance, it's free text access. I'd pick it up. And it looked at analysis of how long it took for new devices that were novel, innovative, coming on the market to get what they said nominal reimbursement from Medicare. And the average was 5.7 years after launch. Right? So what can you do up front to cut down that 5.7 years, right? So safety and efficacy data from controlled trials, okay, direct or strong indirect evidence of decreased recurrence rates are things to think about. I think in this program, you're not going to want to be held to showing that, hey, you can get clear margins and now we save lives and stuff like that. That's a long study, right? In some of these cancers. So how do you set this all up and get there? And I think, as Lana mentioned, there's some needs from a sensitivity and specificity point of view, right? So this is a paper that pulls this out, and they're looking specifically at interoperative margins, and they're saying 95% sensitivity, 85% specificity. Now, what about an example? And I hope being careful here, but there's a product called Margin Probe. It's designed to look interoperatively at margin. They don't have coverage, right? Their sensitivity is 57 to 75% based on studies, 60, 70% specificities. The clinical trials they're doing that, when you look at the payer, each of these payers have online what their medical policies are, and we'll go through why they're not covering things, right? And they had some problems with their study designs and things like that. So looking at what's happened with other technologies already out there, maybe in this space or in other spaces, will give you some ideas of what do we need to be thinking about as we move forward with this to head this off at the pass, that we're not getting our 510K or de novo or PMA and then all of a sudden find out, oh, we should have done this. So going back to what Craig said, begin this up front. So Medicare has some specific new technology programs, specific rules, specific things you have to do, but really they're divided between a new tech add-on payment, which is for in inpatient use for DRG. So hospitals under Medicare, they get one payment, no matter what the stay is for a patient. If they have a certain diagnosis and a certain procedure, it maps them to a DRG. This enables for a 3-year period for technologies to get additional incremental add-on payment on top of that DRG. Hospitals get reimbursed up to 65% of the cost of that technology, disposable, not capital. You have transitional pass-through payment and new tech ambulatory payment classification. So these are for outpatients that provide either for the device incremental payment on top of what the hospitals get paid, or for the entire procedure. If it's an entirely new procedure that's not described by any codes or anything like that, that's where that fits in. And there's a newer program called Transitional Coverage Emerging Technologies, or TCET, which is a proposed rule by Medicare right now. The comment period for that ended last week, so a 60-day comment period. Still some things to be worked out with that. What's the definition of what they're going to cover? What's the timeline be implemented? I won't go into details about any of these. That you have for the first 3, everything you want to know about is online on CMS website. Now, importantly, on the right-hand side here is you have breakthrough device designation with the FDA. It applies to a device that may be going through a 510K, de novo, or PMA. And you apply for this as a Q sub prior to when you do your application. There's specific kind of requirements for this. I've been involved personally in about doing 8 of these, right? And if you understand where it may fit in, it helps. The critical thing about this from a reimbursement perspective, if you have breakthrough device designation, you apply for new tech add-on or transitional pass-through, Medicare waives the need to show substantial clinical improvement. And the reason why most technologies do not get those two is because they don't show substantial clinical improvement. So how can, when you are developing the device, think about how does this fit in breakthrough? What do I need to get to breakthrough? And really think about that as you're going along the process. And when do you do it? So most of the time you're going to have a little bit of human data on this. I have a couple clients who didn't have any clinical data with it, still got it. But again, thinking about ahead of time, where does this fit into our timeline, our milestones, so that when we do commercialize, we've made the bar a little bit lower, at least from a Medicare point of view. Now, the private insurers, they don't have a special program that if you have NTAP or TPT, that they're going to cover it, but it helps a little bit. The other thing is, as I always call about design for manufacturability. You start building this, putting it all together, and you end up with something that costs this much, right? You're going to have a challenge getting in the hospital. So early on, how do we, don't make it cheap, all right? I don't like the word cheap. Make it less expensive, less costly. And this slide, it goes through some things on the right-hand side of here's things to think about, but how do you think about this up front as you're beginning that product development process? So you bake it in right then, rather than designing something and then back into trying it. Well, how do we make it cheaper? A lot of companies do that, and then it becomes much more a struggle. So I think the other thing is we talk about the user side of things. You know, does the technology require incremental resources to the hospital, either in the operating room or up front? You know, a lot of these companies have these big machines and they make money by selling maintenance agreements, right? How do you make it so that you have a longer lifespan, downtime, right? People will have to buy 2 of them. If it's not reliable, what happens if it's not there? Downtime, get another one. So thinking about this and decreasing your cost of goods, really, really important, because it's going to help you as you come into the hospital and not have a $300,000 machine versus having a $50,000 machine, but you have a disposable with it that can get reimbursed, and then they can amortize the cost of capital over time. And also a part of that is the ability to use it for more than one type of cancer. They're bringing in, and they're only useful for breast cancer. Well, now you can't amortize it across the different types of cancers. And it becomes a little bit easier when you can say, hey, this has different types of uses. Next, and I think we were talking about, the user interface. In the FDA term, it's human factors engineering, HFE. There are companies out there who've gone to the FDA, put in their application, they have what they need to get their 510K or de novo, but they didn't do a good enough job with HFEs, and the FDA didn't clear the device. They're really, really focused on this right now. So this is where going back and leveraging what Craig can do with his group to get this input. Users, it's not just physicians, it's who's touching this thing throughout the process, right? What are some of the hazards? What are the things that can happen? How can you make it safer? But getting user input early and often. I worked with a company that was doing stuff in the spine area, and they're from outside the US, and the engineers designed both the implant and all the instrumentation without talking to one orthopedic or neurosurgeon and tried to bring it to the market. It just doesn't work that way. So trying to come in and learn as much as you can from the users as you're early on in the design process is going to help you accomplish something in the end. So these are just some examples of current technologies out there. I work with companies, the whole scope of, and I think clinical pathway of oncology. So I've worked with companies doing stuff in molecular diagnostics, sequencing, trying to determine biomarker development to, everything treatment. So ablation technologies, surgical technologies to reduce bleeding and stuff like that during the procedures. But there already is technologies out there that are kind of the baseline to help start with, to look at what are their positives of them, but what are the negatives, and learn from the experience that's gone on out there. And then you have the future. So artificial intelligence, everybody's doing AI stuff. I'm working with companies doing AI types of things, both for imaging, but also other types of diagnosis things, and virtual reality. I've worked with a couple of companies that have virtual reality glasses for, assessing, patients would wear for assessing gait and things like that. So I think this is what's cool about this program is it's blue sky. How can you look at the technologies that are out there now to learn something, but also look at the future and the new things that are coming out and go from there. Whoops, go back. Okay, I thought I was going to. So I had 3 points I'm going to make on the right is, most of the technologies out there right now have been looked at in a single type of cancer. Right. So how do you take the pan-cancer approach to this? In the diagnostics world with sequence and stuff like that, they're pan-cancer. Some of the new drugs out there are pan-cancer. They have more leverageability across that. Avoid high upfront capital costs. Right. This is going to preclude hospitals from adopting it. Right. How do you look at can you put a disposable component or not? And then, how do you get a good, lower that re-excision rate? The bar is getting lower with guidelines and stuff like that. So that makes it hard to show that significant difference when that bar gets lower. But looking for these types of things as you go along and planning this all out from day zero is really kind of the focus that'll help out. So in summary, you have to show clinical effectiveness. That's important. That's number one. But economic utility. And is that economic utility from a hospital provider perspective, or is it from a payer perspective, or both? You can't just do one. You got to think about both of them. You need to leverage the available programs from the FDA and CMS to help you get early positive coverage decision. It may not get you the entire patient population, but it gets you on the market. You can start ramping revenue and get real world experience. So this is where you see a lot of companies out there will get their studies, but you need real world data to get further on. And then incorporating measures to reduce both direct and indirect costs that helps with the acquisition. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Georgina Perry. I'm an agreement specialist under the Acquisition and Contracting Office. The purpose of this portion of the presentation is to provide you with a brief overview as to why the BAA was selected as the solicitation process for this program, and also to hopefully answer some of the contractual questions you may have as you're preparing to draft your abstract and subsequently your full proposal if an invitation is extended. The BAA is a widely utilized and highly recognized process to procure R&D within the federal government. Those that are familiar with DARPA or ARPA will find that the process is fairly similar. The BAA process is defined under FAR Part 35, and the terminology and nomenclature that is commonly associated with the FAR will be seen throughout this BAA. However, ARPA-H does not intend to procure FAR-based procurements, and does not they intend to award financial assistance instruments. The reason being is that the BAA is seeking an opportunity to invite and award solutions within the industry that has typically shied away from working with the federal government due to the restrictive FAR terms and conditions. The BAA is merit-based. In a merit-based environment, we're looking for revolutionary solutions. So we're looking for the best performers, best experience, best teams, and best solutions. Under this environment, a budget range or ceiling is not established because once again, we're looking for the best of the best. Best ideas are more important than price. The BAA allows for a competitive process where the best ideas will be selected and move forward from the abstract to the full proposal process, while each offer or proposer will retain a unique statement of work that aligns with the proposed solution. The BAA allows for a variety of approaches to a problem, not one singular solution. And the BAA allows for flexibility and for a variety of award instruments to be considered. And this situation, we will be considering financial assistance awards. Some of the BAA basics, award types. The government will allow proposers to propose an award type. So you'll have an opportunity to have some say as to what award type we should consider for your solution. There are two award types that will be contemplated on this BAA. The first is the cooperative agreement, and the second is the other transactions agreements. Award timeline. Abstracts are due 2 weeks from today, which is September 21st, and full proposals are due November 16th. We anticipate that full proposals will be fully evaluated by January of 2024, and negotiations will begin in February of 2024 or sooner. During these negotiations, you'll have an opportunity to negotiate the statement of work, the terms and conditions, and once again, we'll look at the award instrument at that time and determine if the one that you have proposed is the best for the solution. Award funding. There is no award funding ceiling or limitation provided. And the reason, once again, is because there's a focus on technical quality and not necessarily price. Traditional awards. So since we are not following the FAR and not awarding FAR-based procurements, grants will not be considered and FAR-based procurements will not be considered as well. The first award type is a cooperative agreement. A cooperative agreement is a financial assistance instrument that carries out a public purpose. The cooperative agreements fall under 2 CFR Part 200, 45 CFR Part 75, and there may be also some HHS grant policy statements that may be applicable under this environment. Under a cooperative agreement, substantial involvement is required. And there's an expectation that throughout the life of this agreement that is awarded, that both ARPA-H and the proposers will be working collaboratively throughout the life of the agreements. And this is one of the reasons why a cooperative agreement differs from a grant, because there is no substantial involvement in a grant, and is once again, one of the reasons why we're not contemplating grants. The other award type is other transactions. Other transactions are authorized when the use of such authority is essential to promoting the success of the project. Other transactions are similar to contracts in that there is an expressed valid offer and acceptance and adequate consideration. However, in this environment, we will not be following the FAR once again. Other transactions reflect commercial contracting, and what we do is we leverage commercial practices in this environment. OTs are also collaborative. And so there's an expectation that there will be a partnership throughout the life of the agreement that is awarded. And there's also going to be opportunities for free-flowing negotiations, which are far less restrictive than the FAR-based procurements. I will go ahead and turn it over to my branch chief, Ryan Daniels, to provide you with the pros and cons on both of these two award sites.
Thank you. So it can be somewhat unique to allow offers to propose their own award type. And so a lot of the questions that we've gotten on our previous BAAs, which one should I choose? And so there are pros and cons to each. For cooperative agreements, they're familiar, and many organizations, particularly universities, are used to cooperative agreements or grants. They are under the financial assistance umbrella. Their systems are designed for it. Many in this space are likely to also have grants and cooperative agreements with NIH, and it's just simpler for them to go with that approach. The cons are that these terms are largely set by law and regulation with limited ability to negotiate. As Gina mentioned, the CFR, the grants policy statement contain many required terms and conditions that there's not a lot of room for negotiation on. And there are many of these requirements that might be unappealing to a commercial entity. You cannot charge profit. There are ceiling on unaudited indirect rates. And they're much more bureaucratic than OTs. There's requirements of certain forms that must be submitted, rigid reporting requirements. If you've ever gotten a grant or financial assistance, you're probably very familiar with the many forms, literal forms that attach to that. OTs, as Gina mentioned, there are many laws and regulations that are not applicable. That would be the Competition and Contracting Act, by Dole, the financial assistant regulations, cost accounting standards, bid protests, and so forth. As Gina mentioned, they are much more commercial in terms. If you see, or when you see the terms and conditions, sort of our sample terms and conditions for other transactions, it should mostly look a lot like you would see in a typical private commercial transaction between parties. And the biggest part of that is it allows you to negotiate intellectual property terms. Generally, we start with the general sort of scheme that the government has under IP, which is that the performer will own it, but the government will get certain license rights in it, usually at like a government purpose or a federal purpose. But it can be negotiated from there. We can go outside of that scheme. We can refine where along the lines that looks like, what that looks like. And there's also ability for different payment structures. Advanced payments, certainly under like a FAR contract, are much harder to do, but we can get much more creative with that. And it's also a streamlined process. OTs were created when the Space Act was created. And the idea there was to not make my life easier, but to make your life easier by sort of inducing companies and entities that would not normally contract with the federal government to contract, because it will look much more like their normal commercial relationships and won't cause them to need to totally flip and redesign how they do business with the government. And there are some cons. There's, a lack of guardrails. Some performers do like the guardrails of financial assistance. They like the guardrails of the FAR. It's easy, it's knowable, it's their favorite meal at their favorite restaurant, and is just much simpler than having to upturn what they do just to have another transaction. And it requires careful negotiation. Usually when I've done with, FAR or grants, I can ignore your lawyer's comments on certain terms and conditions and go talk to Congress if you have a problem with that. But here, there's a lot more freedom to negotiate and get the kind of agreement that makes sense for both parties. So, all right. Thank
you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go over the process overview. So the process under this BAA, an abstract is required. The abstract cannot exceed 4 pages. This, of course, excludes the cover page and the ROM. All sections of the BAA that are applicable to the abstract should be addressed within your submission. Under this abstract submission, only criterion number 1 will be applicable, which is the scientific and technical merits. And all abstracts are to be submitted via the ECPS website. Full proposals are by invitation only, and they are to be submitted via the ECPS for OTs and via grants.gov for cooperative agreements. The summary of the proposal and detailed proposal information should not exceed 30 pages. If the evaluation and selection for the full proposal and the abstracts, that information is provided under page 48 of the BAA, and the government will review each conforming abstract against criterion number 1. Under the full proposal, criterions 1 through 4 will be utilized and evaluated, and those are in descending order. The selection for the award will be made based on the information provided within the BAA. So this is criterion number 1. So this is the overall scientific and technical merit. And so we're looking that you address innovation, feasibility, achievability. We're also looking that the outcomes being proposed are actually achievable and that you address technical risk and any type of mitigation strategy that is being proposed. And once again, criteria number 1 is only applicable to the abstract and full proposal. Criteria number 2 is the proposer's capability and related experience. We're looking for, once again, team experience, expertise, and experience in managing similar efforts as the one being proposed. Criteria number 3 is the potential contribution and relevance to the ARPA-H mission, and this is applicable to the full proposal. And so we're looking to see how your solution will meet unmet needs within the biomedicine and to help improve the overall health outcomes. And number 4 is the one I think is maybe the one that we usually tend to receive a little bit more questions on, which is reasonableness, realism, and affordability. And this is applicable to the full proposal. The full proposal must include the Excel worksheet required. And we're looking for price reasonableness, and we want to ensure that the price is fair and reasonable. And what we're looking for is for a price that is not too high when compared to the statement of work. Cost realism is not required, but may be performed. And what we're looking for in cost realism is that the proposed costs are consistent with the proposed statement of work and technical goals. And we're also looking to see if it is unrealistically too low, because that would be a concern to us. And the last one is IP. So IP is something that may be negotiated and should be addressed within your proposal. Some of the final guidance is that any and all changes to the BAA will be made via formal amendment. And so we highly encourage that you continue to monitor the SAM.gov website and grants.gov. And a reminder that no information shared during today's Proposers Day should be construed as modifying the terms and conditions of the BAA. I highly encourage you to thoroughly read the BAA and conform to the BAA requirements. Pay close attention to the eligibility requirements. And this last one is very important. Non-conforming proposals will not be evaluated or considered for award. On the right-hand side, we have some reminders on some of the documentation that must be provided with your full proposal. And 2 items that I don't see listed on here are the COI. So we want to make sure that you're always addressing COI, because that's something that we may come back and ask for, and also VAS if it's applicable. And some dates and timelines to remember, once again, is the abstracts are due in 2 weeks. Final proposals are due November 16th. And if you do have any questions, I would say first visit our frequently asked questions website, which is the PSI FAQs. And if you do not see an answer in there, please do submit an email with your question, and that question will be addressed and published to the FAQs website. Next, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Arthur, our BAA coordinator, to provide you with some additional information.
Thank you all. I'm going to just re-emphasize a couple of the points Georgina made. So first off, when submitting FAQs, please be sure to write it as clearly as possible. Don't jumble a bunch of questions into one. Try and one question, next question, just to make it easier for us to go through it and respond to you appropriately. Another thing to really focus on is if there's a contradiction between the FAQ and the BAA, please refer to the BAA. And we will be sure to try and submit all our submit all the answers to sam.gov. And also one other big point is please be sure to submit all your questions as early as possible, just so we have time to respond to them. Last minute questions may not be able to get answered before the proposal deadline. And do not include proprietary information. Otherwise, we will remove that when we submit the FAQ. So I just wanted to go through some of our process. So when reviewing abstracts, you're submitting it through ECPS. We won't start reviewing until after the abstract deadline. So if you have questions or want responses and you submit it early, that we're not going through it until that deadline. Once we receive it, we're going through a compliance and responsiveness review. So we'll make sure it adheres to the requirements, making sure the page limits are met. We're not going to review past the 4 pages for the technical content, and make sure it gets submitted on time. So make sure you submit early as possible, just so you're not late accidentally. Once that goes through, we'll have a subject matter expert reviewer. And then the PM will review all the abstracts, the subject matter experts review, and make a recommendation for the SRO to approve. Once that happens, the invite or not invite will go out. And in rare cases, we might ask for additional information. But we will try and get that information out to you as soon as possible. So for the people that were invited, have the most amount of time possible to review. It's a very similar process for the proposals for the people that were invited. As a reminder, for other transactions, you get submitted on ECPS. For cooperative agreements, get submitted on grants.gov. For the big difference is it's 3 federal reviewers review each of the proposals. And then once again, the PM reviews everything and the SRO makes the final determination before the notifications get sent and negotiations begin. And then this is just pulled from the BAA. Please make sure to read the BAA as closely as possible to go through these items. The forms and supporting documents can be combined into Volume 2 supporting documents as allowed by grants.gov, and all the other documents get submitted on ECPS or grants.gov. And these are the documents that we utilize to as part of negotiation. So that is me. And now up is Jennifer Myers.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm Jennifer Myers. I'm the business finance manager for the PSI program. So I'm just going to go over some do's and don'ts and provide a checklist for the cost proposals. It'll hopefully make it easier for you and for us. So certainly the do's, you know, a lot of things that we're going to be looking for when we're doing the cost realism is about evaluation, is making sure, you know, the total cost is realistic. It shows it ties into the statement of work and the expertise that you'll be providing. We really would like a task breakdown by fiscal year and phase, and then also your expected cost per month. It really will help us evaluate where your project is going. And some of the subcontractors, we would really like to have all the same information that the prime contractor provides. So making sure that all the backup, any cost, $10,000 or more, we need backup to be able to evaluate if those are realistic. The biggest don't is trying to strategize on cost and maybe, estimate junior staff instead of the level of expertise. And that's where the technical evaluators will be able to, kind of tell us finance folks if it's realistic, for the staffing. So please don't strategize on cost. If you do have to hide rows, just hide them. Don't delete them, because then it's going to mess up the entire cost workbook. And then I did provide a proposal checklist. These are just, again, things that whoever is helping you build your cost proposal, it's just a good reminder of the items that we're going to be looking for, so that we don't have to come back and ask for additional information. So with that, I am finished. But Dr. Emily Ospinar and Dr. Adrienne Ruskin are going to go over some FAQs for you. So come on up.
Hi, I am Adrienne Ruskin. I am one of the CETAs. A CETA is a role that's a scientific, engineering, and technical advisor. You're going to be hearing from us a lot if you get selected as a performer. So we're just going to go over a few FAQs. If we don't cover your questions, email us and we'll try to get to you. So how big can our program be? What's the overall budget? We will not provide an overall budgetary details for Sci. We will not provide a target number for your budget. No budget ceiling has been established. Propose what makes sense for your project. Propose something realistic, comprehensive. Don't use the most junior staff because you can bill them at a lower rate. Like, we know that's a thing that people want to do. Use the staff that you require to make sure that your program has the highest chance of succeeding. There are salary cap rules. They are sort of confusing. There is, you can read the full paragraph, but essentially we are bound by the salary limitations under the NIH policies. And essentially, in our case, what it means that no one person in 1 year, regardless of their level of effort, can be paid more than $212,100. Teaming specifics. Your team can have any composition that you want. You don't need to have an academic partner. You don't need to have a business partner, as long as you believe that your team can get it done. Can one group be part of multiple proposals? And what about one person? So a group of or a person can be part of two proposals. They cannot be the prime on both. This might happen if you're someone who's providing like a technology that's going to, let's say, like a contrast agent that's going to apply to two different proposals. You could be sub on both of those. Once all the negotiations are done, if you're both accepted, make sure that you don't have any person billed at 200% of their time. Make sure that you don't overtax your team. Is there a limit to how many institutions can team? No, it'll make all your budgets more complicated. But here we'll make sure that just basically a large team can do very well here. You might have different expertise covering different areas. Can you have multiple PIs? No, you can have co-Is, but there's going to be one like prime PI. Can you change teams partway through the program? It's going to depend. You'll be in very close contact with us. So if this is something that's coming up, you think that the success of your program will be affected, you think you have a higher chance of succeeding if you bring someone else in, if you change out the partner for some subcomponent of your technologies, talk to us about it and we'll see what we can do. And finally, here, will you establish teams for us? No. We hope that here you'll talk to each other, go to the poster sessions, make teams here, go to the website. There is a teaming website where people have started already to submit their profiles. We have about 25 teaming profiles up there right now, and we're absolutely still accepting further submissions to that. So if you didn't manage to connect with someone here, or if you're virtual, go to the teaming website and see who you can find, reach out to people, and we wish you luck. This is also a wall of text that I'm not going to read to you. International proposers are accepted. There are rules about it, and awards to domestic entities are prioritized, but non-US entities may participate, but they're encouraged to collaborate with US entities. And there will be some additional amount of scrutiny, and you still have to comply with all of the rules and regulations. All right, so as for government proposers, FFRDCs, UARCs, government institutes are not eligible for award, but you can still work with us if you're an FFRDC. Email us, tell us your situation, tell us how you want to participate, and we'll have a separate conversation. We're still very interested in that. But you can't apply for a cooperative agreement or other transaction under this. So meetings, we are not able to accommodate individual meetings or calls outside of these sidebars for which you've either already registered or not. And specifically, even during these sidebars, we can't really specifically tell you right now if we like your particular technical approach. We have to evaluate everyone's BA submission fairly. We can't give you specific advice about your technical approach right now. You've already heard about the timelines and feedback, but basically due September 21st on the abstracts, we will provide comments. Like we'll provide you a move forward or don't submit. But we will also give you a few comments if we think that, some part of your abstract is strong, but another part you need to beef up in the full proposal. We will tell you that. So please do read the comments. We'll try, because we're very interested in receiving the best full proposals that we can, and we will try to make our comments to make the full proposals better. And for the full proposal, you may not submit a full proposal if your abstract is not selected. We will not read it. We will only read the full proposals that are in response to abstracts that are encouraged to continue. And feedback will be provided for all full proposals. We will do it as fast as we can. There's lots of holidays during that period. We aim to make our selections by February. Now I will turn it over to Emily. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Emily Ospinar. I'm also a CETA for the PSI program. So about intellectual property, who will own the IP? So generally, the government does not take ownership of IP produced under awards. Under cooperative agreements, which were spoken about earlier, performers retain ownership of IP created under an award, but the government receives a license to use the IP for federal purposes. For other transaction agreements, there is more flexibility, and IP will be subject to negotiations between the proposer and ARPA-H. And at a minimum, ARPA-H wants to ensure that IP restrictions do not keep the breakthrough technologies from the people who can benefit from those technologies. Specifically to contrast agents, do you need them? So for TA1B and TA2, you do not need a contrast agent if you can meet the requirements without one. So just be clear in your abstract about how your planned technologies will enable your device and software to meet the technical requirements. And for TA1A, you may not use a contrast agent. And we have here the definition as a substance administered to the patient before or during surgery. You may use a dye or stain on the sample, but you're not required but you're not required if you do not need a stain to meet the technical requirements. If you are not developing a contrast agent, you do not need to meet the milestones, requirements, etc. That pertain solely to the contrast agent. Pertaining to device, can we integrate existing commercial, existing products, commercial off-the-shelf products? Products have different stages of development for our solution. And the goal is to create a solution that meets the program requirements. So it's good practice to neither reinvent the wheel nor settle for a subpar solution. For TA2, does my product have to visualize or just locate? So the product has to locate critical anatomy with high accuracy, as we specify in the BAA. But if you can do so by non-visual means in a way that conveys that information to a surgeon, that is acceptable. And we have here an example, such as maybe a scalpel that blinks a light when approaching a nerve. That would meet the localization and accuracy requirements. Pertaining to metrics, the requirements / timelines seem aggressive. Do you really intend for us to hit these metrics? And we want you to work hard to meet them. So we have here a quote from Michelangelo. The greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. But what if I do not meet the metrics at one point in my project? Will you stop my project? So we have 2 phases. And not all are guaranteed to continue on to phase 2. However, the metrics are not necessarily rigid based on a go or no-go criteria. And instead, they're used to help make decisions about whether sufficient progress has been made. In other words, the answer to these questions will depend on the state of the program and how much progress has been made. If you have an advanced prototype, can you go faster than the milestones and metrics, such as can you do a clinical trial? Yes, absolutely. And again, these materials will be made available online. And many answers to the questions that we receive are in the BAA. The BAA is currently on the website. So make sure that you've read the BAA. And if you still have any questions, we will be updating our PSI FAQ periodically on the website and on sam.gov. And you can also email us at psi@arpa-h.gov. And I believe with that, I pass this off for closing remarks.
So I know it's been a long morning, and I'm very grateful for you putting up with us for 3 hours without a break. Again, find each other. We really want the best science, and we are looking forward to receiving the abstract in a couple of weeks. We will be around here, so talk to each other, talk to us, and we're looking forward to great proposals. So thank you.